Hopefully this will start to speed up in a minute here. There we go. There we go. All right, let's see how many people we've got here. Okay, so welcome to my Guru's online classroom. Today we're going to be talking about critiquing an argument in under 30 minutes, practicing rapid-fire evaluation of a given argument on the GRE and the GMAT. So let's start out by talking a little bit about analytical writing. This is something that is common, to both exams. Let's talk quickly about the difference. On the GRE, 1 second, you are going to get GRE Analytical Writing. It's going to consist of 2 essays, right? That's going to be the issue and the argument. All right, I'm not going to talk about the issue today. We're going to talk about the argument essay because that one is common to both the GRE and the GMAT. Deepak, since you're the only student here at the moment, can I ask you what do you know which exam are you planning on taking?
So GMAT.
Feel free to just tell me you're typing in the chat window. Just out of curiosity.
GMAT. Are you able to hear me?
But the thing is, in general, are you taking the GMAT? But in general, the analytical writing part, this part of it, the analyzing an argument, is going to be the same on the GR and the GMAT. So on the okay, it's going to be 30 minutes each. Okay, that's the GRE. On the GMAT, the good thing is that you're only going to have one. You're only going to have the analyze an argument essay. So here's the thing. So here's going to be 30 minutes as well. Now, you might ask, is writing important? Because a lot of people who are, when they take the GRE and the GMAT, they tend to, focus primarily on the kind of the more, the better known verbal and quantitative sections. And it's always a little bit kind of, there's often some confusion as to kind of how important the writing section is, especially because when you're taking, when you're applying to graduate schools, there's going to be other examples of writing, right? So, you've got your personal statements, there's your supplemental essays, right? There might be writing samples. Now, here's the thing about the writing on the GMAT. Writing, let's look at it this way. Good writing can help. Look at it that way. Bad writing can hurt. Let's see. Good writing can help a little bit. Bad writing can hurt substantially. All right. So essentially what you're looking for, it's not really going to do all that much for an application. If you get something like, whether you get a 4 or a 5 or something like that, but you don't want to get a 2. You don't want to go in there and say, okay, I'm applying to graduate school, but I don't know how to write. Because if you're getting 1 or 2 essay, they're going to say, well, okay, we've got a discrepancy here. What's going on? Why is the writing not up to par? All right. So you're really looking for, you want a 4, 5, or 6. And the distinctions between a 4 and a 5 and a 5 or a 6 are really not that much. I mean, 6 is really stuff writing, 4 is good writing, right? 5 is very good writing, something like that. But the thing is, they've got your other writing samples, right? So they just want to know that you can hold your own, all right? But a 1, 2, or 3 can really drag you down. All right. So you really want to figure out what to do in order to get into that kind of the top half of the scores. Now, how are scores done? Both in the GRE and the GMAT, the analytical writing is done like this. Basically, there are 2 scores: a human and a computer, artificial intelligence, if you want to call it that. All right, 1 person, 1 computer. All right. Now, ideally, so the computer is obviously going to look for specific things, right? Specific kind of hard points, because it's going to be, it's going to be through machine learning and all that. It's going to be trained in terms of, in terms of, kind of like what, kind of how to look for things structurally and that kind of thing. So in general, they should agree within a point. If there's more than, if there's a disagreement, then there will be a third party, human arbitrator. All right. Now, scoring is done in half-point increments. All right, 0 to 6. All right, so you get 0.5 of 5.5. All right, and they are looking for certain things. What they're looking for, they are looking for. Make sure I've got this stuff down here. The important things. The first is to answer the question. All right, you want to make sure that you stay on topic. Make it clear. All right. Make sure that it's clear to the readers, because the readers are going to be reading 50 essays in in one stint, right? They don't care what you have to say, and they're not going to remember it all after after they're done, right? So you want to do whatever you can to use language that hits them hard, so that they know kind of that the structure is clear, that they know what your argument is. All right, that's the first. First is answer the question. Second thing that they're going to be looking for is, okay, structure, organizational style. All right, let's say structure, organization. All right, and flow. All right, so are you presenting your, and here's where we're getting to, what the real topic of the session is, kind of how to really extract, kind of a hard-hitting argument quickly. It's like, how can you really kind of identify your key points quickly? All right, so this is what you want to do. It needs to be clear, paragraph by paragraph, kind of what the argument is. All right. Each, so say the thesis and, kind of key points in each paragraph need to be extremely clear. That's what structure will do, right? That also includes things like, transitional statements, stuff like that, right? Okay, next thing, sorry, let me shift this up. All right, third thing that they're looking for is going to be your analytical ability. All right, so say you've presented your structure, say, okay, well, I'm going to talk about, I found this flaw in the second part discussed, right? But then you need to talk about why. Why is it a flaw? How can you make the, how would you improve the argument? So you need to show that rather than just kind of like, dropping a line here and there, you actually can talk about it for, for a sentence or two, that you actually have the ability to critically think. Critical thinking and evaluation ability. All right. Next is going to be, they're going to evaluate you on writing style, how you're writing, right? Are you using, is it clear? Good vocabulary? Varied sentence structure? Readable? Right? That's what they're looking for. Okay, and then the last thing, probably the least important, well, definitely the least important, is going to be things like grammar and proper English. All right, this is less important if you you don't want to make a lot of grammatical mistakes, but a typo or a grammar error here and there, that's not going to cost you, unless it kind of unless you kind of do it repeatedly and it's clear that you don't have a really good command of of writing. But for the most part, you can, when you proofread at the end, take a look to make sure the grammar is is solid, but that's the last thing to worry about. All right. Okay, so now let's talk about kind of like how to let me bring one in here. Bring an actual topic. So here's what you want to do. We're not going to look at this yet. We're going to talk about kind of how to do things structurally. So when you start to write, you're going to have half an hour. Change the color for this.
Actually, fonts are
How do you
very
want to break
small.
this down? What I would recommend is, give yourself roughly, say, maybe 1 to 4 minutes. Because the thing is, you've only got half an hour. You don't have tons of time. Let's say like maybe let's say 1 to 2 minutes to read. Now, you're reading. You're not just reading passively. You want to read actively. All right. You want to make sure that you understand the what the argument is. All right. Read actively, like interrogate while you're reading. Ask questions. All right. Don't spend like 10 minutes on it. You don't have time. but you do want to make sure that you really understand what it's trying to say. All right, so don't skim it. Just go and give it a fair read. All right, then you're going to take maybe 2 to 3 minutes and outline. The outline is really important because the outline is where you're going to kind of you're going to keep yourself in line. All right, you're going to make sure that that you know how to articulate the arguments, that it's clear in your own mind, and when it's clear in your own mind, it's going to be clear to the readers. All right. So 2 and 3 minutes to outline. Brief notes, whether you use the GMAT whiteboard, whatever. Brief notes. All right. Don't don't outline in complete sentences, but you want to jot down what the key potential flaws are going to be. All right. Then the way you're going to lay this thing out is going to be basically it's going to be 4 paragraphs. You could do 5, but it's like I'd say you really, for these kinds of both in the GRE and the GMAT, I would say that you really only need 4 paragraphs to to have a solid argument in there. For the issue one, you could go 4 or 5, but for the argument one, you really only need 4. All right. The first is intro, and for the intro, you really want to demonstrate that you understand the argument. Right? But that you know that it's flawed, but recognize that the argument is flawed. So the kind of thing that you're going for here is, okay, I've read this, I see what the author is trying to say. Okay, it may make sense on its surface, on its face, but there are some really clear flaws with this argument, which I'm going to lay out, and that's going to be your thesis, right? So your thesis statement is really, it is flawed, and here's why. And then each paragraph is going to kind of follow your thesis, right? Your thesis statement, and then kind of outline what those flaws are. And what we're going to be doing in the next, say, 20 minutes is going and looking through to kind of see how to kind of quickly extract, what the flaws are, right? What's wrong with the argument. Okay, that's your introduction. So paragraphs 2, body paragraph, right? Discuss one or more of the flaws. Body paragraph 3 is really going to be similar. Here, you might introduce, really you can introduce kind of counter arguments. It's like, here's where you're going to kind of critically discuss, all right? And then 4, you're going to conclude. And when you conclude, you're really saying something like, you're sort of kind of restating the thesis to a point, right? Not in those same words. Also show, so sum up the flaws and maybe suggest kind of how it could be made better. All right, so let's take a look at one of these and kind of figure out how best to kind of how best to extract. 1 second. Actually, something. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to use a different example here. So let me grab a better one. 1 second. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm going to use this one instead. Okay. So I use this one in a different session. I think it might be better to use. Yeah. All right, let's take a look here. Okay. Okay. Why don't you take take maybe like a minute or two just to kind of read this through. All right, and then I'm going to ask you for some thoughts on this here. All right.
Sure, sure.
And then once you've done that, I'm going to actually kind of read it out loud. And we're going to go over it. We'll do maybe 1 more minute. All right. Okay, so let's do this. I am actually going to, all right, so I'm going to read this out. All right. So, oops. So how can we extract things quickly? Going back to the title of of the session, we want to extract quickly. Within within 30 minutes. How can we identify kind of key arguments before even starting? There's a few things that often show up. All right. Often you will find, let's see, common, let's see, common argument flaws. All right. So it's a good idea to come into the analytical writing section of the test with a few ideas of what commonly tends to show up. Okay. One issue often tends to be that the sample size is too small. All right. And again, I'm doing this without even looking at, without even kind of talking about this specifically. So for example, if we have, if we've evaluated kind of one instance, and based on that one instance, we're saying, okay, yeah, this is a problem. Well, have we tested anything else, right? So let's look here. Okay, so what's it saying? I'm going to read it out loud. When the Apogee company had all its operations in one location, it was more profitable than it is today. Okay, or the Apogee company should close down its field offices and conduct all its operations from a single location. Such centralization would improve profitability by cutting costs and helping the company maintain better supervision of all employees. Actually, before we even do that, it can also be a good idea to kind of quickly summarize what the argument is in even fewer words than you normally would. Deepak, do you want to try that out? Do you want to see if you can kind of write down a window here, maybe in about half the in about half the length that is currently presented? How would you kind of distill the argument down to its essence? Want to give it a shot?
Are you able to hear me, sir?
I'll give you say like a 30 or a minute to come up with something.
Are you able to hear me? Hello?
And I'm going to do one on your own while you're doing that. Just a second. Sorry about the noise in the background here. Here's what I would do. All right. So, single location was more profitable. This is kind of the way I would do it. All right. Okay. So sometime in the past, it had everything in more profitable. All right. Okay. More profitable than today. Okay. So, so there's your premise, then your conclusion. right. So the kind of the implication being that sort of the pilot study, right? It's like, well, this worked in the past, so maybe maybe it'll work again now, right? So therefore, closing office should shift to a single location. All right. Okay. So and then this will say why would cut costs. Let's see. The profitability is less now than it was some time ago, and platform operators who were so I'm going to read yours. Since profitability is less now than it was some time ago in the past when operations were from a single location, evidence, yeah, therefore conclusion, we should improve profitability by moving to a single location. Yeah, exactly. And what I'm doing, I'm kind of like laying it down sort of like, kind of premises, conclusions. All right, single location is profitable, right? That was, the pilot study, that was the past. Therefore, close down offices, shift to a single location. Why? Would cut costs, right? And improve supervision, right? So what I would do, I would try to write this in as few, as few lines as possible, as few words as possible, all right? So here's what we're going on then. Okay, so what we can see here, we've got a sample size of basically 1. It's like, how do we know this is going to work? Or why do we think this is going to work? Well, because we tried it before, all right? So that's their argument. All right, now, what I would say here is, well, okay, but have you evaluated it, has this worked in other places? Right? Just because you did this here, right? What parameters have changed? Has this been tried anywhere else? Have you done any kind of comparative studies? We don't necessarily know, right? If we knew, that would give us more information. If we knew that actually kind of centralization would increase profitability. I can't talk today. From other case studies, that would strengthen the argument, right? So a common argument flaw is that the sample size is too small. That works here as well, right? So in our case here, 1 second. So keeps turning colors on me. We have only 1 pilot study from the same firm, right? It'd be stronger if we compared it to something else. Other case studies, other surveys, right? This is a really common thing that will show up, in pretty much every argument, essay that I've seen in the GRE and the GMAT, the sample size of 1 thing. So that's always something that you can talk about, because you could talk not just mention that the sample size is small, but you could go into some details, like, how might you improve it? Like, how a survey is conducted is like, why is it potentially weak? Okay. Another thing to consider is, because we've got an analogous situation, right? We're kind of comparing a pilot situation. It's like, well, okay, we did this in one location. We're trying this here. Well, are all circumstances surrounding it the same? Do we have a valid control study? All right, that's something that another common argument flaw, right? So common argument flaw. Do we have a viable control study? All right. So were the parameters, that were in play for the, for the initial centralization, are they the same parameters, that are in play here? Are the economic situation, is the economic situation the same? Are transportation situations the same? Are there any changes in the workforce? Do we know that we actually have, the exact same situation going on in the past as to here? Do we have an analogous relationship that we can? All right. And this, because you're taking the GMAT, I'm sure you've now taken, you've had a lot of looks at the critical reasoning types of questions, right? This often comes into play in the strengthen and weaken type of questions, right? Where, so if you have an analogous, kind of an analogous set of circumstances, something that would strengthen the argument is if it's more likely that you have a valid control experiment. If circumstances surrounding A and circumstances surrounding B are the same, then you can measure them more directly, right? If you were to weaken the argument, then you might have, some of the circumstances might be different, right? Because then you're not going to have as valid a control experiment, all right, or a control study, okay? So in this case here, what do we have? Well, it's like, okay, all the operations are in one location. It's more profitable. But we don't know anything that's driving the profitability. We don't know anything about, like, is it in a more expensive city? Are there different maintenance costs? What's involved with kind of like, what's involved with the costs associated with maintaining the satellite offices or whatever else? We don't know. All right. So we don't know that we actually have one situation that's directly comparable to another situation. And that's, another flaw that you can talk about. All right. So here, let's put this one in red for the current case study. So we can't say for sure. Let me phrase that. We can't say for sure that the centralization in one location occurred under the same circumstances as the decentralization here. All right. So these are two things that you can come armed with, because these are very, very often going to come into play. The sample size is 1, right? 1 second. Okay. So we've got sample size 1. Then we've got like case studies that may not be directly comparable. You could potentially get one entire paragraph out of each of these if you kind of talk about them in some detail. All right. Then you can kind of build on this. So you can say, well, okay, let's look at some other potential issues, right? Exactly. All right. So here's where you broaden things. All right. You would take some additional examples. We don't know. Yeah. So what you're saying, let me put this in blue. Okay. Common argument flaws. Let's put what you're saying here in the same type of category. Not enough information. Exactly. Yeah, there you go. Okay, this is and again, this is also something that you might potentially, you could get an entire paragraph out of it. You could also potentially put this kind of information or missing information in with the the viable control study thing, right? Because if we don't have enough information, then we can't actually draw a proper assessment. So what you've said is like, okay, we don't have enough information about revenue. It's exactly right. Let me put this in red. So for this particular example, lacking revenue info. All right. So cost cutting does not necessarily improve profitability, right? And what are the other factors? One second, doesn't necessarily improve profitability. What if revenue goes down? And then now here's a good example where you might explore. All right. So, and I'm going to put this in kind of category 4. So common argument flaws 4, not enough information. So here is where you might explore and kind of talk about stuff. This is where you kind of get into a critical evaluation, kind of critical assessment of your own argument. Explore, be creative. Okay. So let's take a look at what you've got here. Let's see. So here, for this kind of thing, because this is where things are going to be more specific to the individual question that you're dealing with. So it's like, okay, factors surrounding profitability. Okay, so one is going to be revenue. Revenue. Okay, so so for example, say there's differing economic conditions, right? Are we in a downturn? Right? Has like one location run into runs into some sort of financial trouble. It's some sort of scandal. I mean, like, we don't necessarily know, right? What could potentially drive? Hold on a second. Economic. So are there, say, differences in the workforce? Are salaries higher in some areas? So there's a whole kind of range of things you need to take a look at. All right. Access, right? So there's a whole bunch of areas that you could talk about. Yeah, exactly. Company exchange rate. Exactly. Location. Right. So basically, the way that you can really. Yes, exactly. Yeah, right. So you've clearly got a good sense of kind of like how to basically take a couple of these basic arguments and then go into details. And because you're taking the GMAT, I'm recording this video both for GMAT and GRE students. So some GRE students might not have the same kind of business sense, but because you're applying because you're taking the GMAT, and you're applying to business schools, it will be useful for you to actually kind of show your knowledge, right? Demonstrate that you understand this stuff, which you are right here in the chat, right? So feel free to kind of talk about these things and talk briefly about how they might kind of how they both might weaken the argument or how they might potentially be used to kind of improve the argument. And that gets us to the last point at the beginning here, which is the conclusion, which we talked about at the beginning here. So there, and then the conclusion is there. That's where you're gonna you've spent time talking about the flaws. You've analyzed these things. You kind of know how to identify them quickly, and then what you want to do in the conclusion, see if you can say, well, how might things be improved, right? You're gonna basically state what the issues were, and then talk in general about kind of how things might be made a little bit better. All right, and that's basically it's essentially kind of all you need to do. All right. What I might do, so we've got another say 20 minutes here. What we might do is take a look at another one. All right, give me 1 second. I'm gonna grab one more of these things. You've done a good job. So with this next one, I'm gonna have you kind of go through some of the stuff on your own and kind of talk me through. So give me 1 second. All right, I'm gonna copy this one in a minute. Sorry, I can't move the screen around. I'm looking for a good spot to put this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to move all of this over here. I'll do it this way. Okay, I'm going to let you drive on this one if you like. So why don't you give yourself a minute or two to this through. Give me another 3 seconds or so. Okay, now I'm gonna have once you do that first strategic step, which is kind of summarize this like you did the other one in in about half the basically as few words as possible. I'll give you 30 seconds or a minute to try that out. And go and type your summary in the chat window when you're ready. I'll give you another, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or a minute or so to work on that. All right. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm actually going to copy your. Can I copy this thing? I can't. Yes, I can. All right, I'm going to copy your summary in here. Okay. All right, so we went. All right. Okay, new competitor newspaper comes. Low prices lead to drop in circulation of Mercury newspaper, right? Conclusion: best way to increase circulation is to lower the price until it reaches previous level. Just increased circulation means more advertising revenue. Yep, that's good. I want to actually kind of articulate some of the assumptions that are made that might not necessarily be clearly stated, right? So, for example, okay, you said here a new competitor newspaper came and its low prices lead to drop in circulation of Mercury newspaper. So the idea being, right? So you said flaw, one factor considered. How about news items? Yeah, exactly, right. So you're talking about you're talking about the type of news they're referring to. Okay, gotcha. So considerations. All right. Does Mercury appeal to people? Right. That's what you're saying, right? Are they giving people what they want? All right. Okay. Yeah. So basically, so what we really want to do is say, well, okay, assumption here, right? The kind of the unstated assumption is really that that the cost is driving everything, right? That people want a cheaper paper, right? Now that may be true in part, but as you're saying, it's probably not all of it, right? It's like, well, maybe okay, maybe it's cheaper, maybe it's better, right? Maybe people want gossip, maybe people want better local news, maybe people want opinion columns. We don't know, right? Okay, so what else might drive them? All right. So yeah, exactly. Okay. That's one consideration. You can talk about that. That could take up an entire paragraph. It could take up part of the paragraph. Okay. What else might you consider? Frequency of circulation, very good. Is it enough? Maybe people want to just right, exactly. Maybe people want to see something more often, right? Is mercury circulating often enough? People getting their are getting their required reading in. Exactly. Okay. What else? I would say keep in mind the example one that I gave in the other one, which is your one over here, which is um, the common argument sample size is too small. That applies here, right? It's like, because basically they're saying, okay, we've got a situation where we have lost money to a competitor, right? We think that it's about cost. Okay, but has this kind of thing happened in other cities, right? For example, it's like, I mean, if we take a look at, say, a comparable paper, that is kind of like made the same pricing changes. Did that happen there too, right? Did this happen in Rochester? Did it happen in San Francisco, right? Do we have a number of papers where this actually, how did they deal with it, or what were the factors that drove it? So you can apply that here as well, right? So it's a slightly different use of the analogy, but it still works. You can still write about it. All right. So let's write that in. Okay. Then again, you might consider external factors, right? I mean, like what do we know? What do we know about the readership? What do we know about the type of people who are reading this stuff? What do we know about kind of maybe it's economic circumstances that might be what do we know about what do we know about some is there an online component, right? um, so yeah. Um, yep, exactly. Yep. Any others? But I mean, honestly, I think that again, here this is basically enough to work with. All right. So then, when you structure it, how are you going to do it? Say, well, okay. So what are the things we're going to talk about? Well, it's like, well, okay. So again, your intro is like, yes, I get the argument, right? But there are clear flaws, right? So you got to kind of discuss in your introduction. You're going to say, okay, I understand what this is all about, and I'm going to lay out some of the issues, right? And some of the issues that you're going to lay out really briefly in your thesis statement, is going to be, that's going to be where these come in. So you're going to say it's like however, it is clear that that this assessment of the causes for the decline are flawed. For example. You see what I mean? Yes. Let me take a look. Oh, you mean the conclusion of the statement here? Yeah, I think that one again. I think they're making it. I mean, you want to assume what you want to do. You want to try to think like the people who are writing the argument. It's like, why would they come to that conclusion? You see what I mean? So if you find that kind of like their logical argument doesn't make sense, um, instead of just saying that, okay, I think the argument doesn't make sense, try to figure out what their reasoning might be. All right. Yeah. So it looks like they're talking, they're talking about awareness, right? Now you might feel that, I mean, you might feel it's a weak argument, which is fine, but you want to make sure that you kind of understand what their logic might be, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. You see what I mean? Take 1 second. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think they were getting at. So basically, assume that any argument that any prompt, assume that it's got some internal logic that at least makes sense according to the people who are writing it. You may not agree with it. You may feel that it's like, wait, this is shaky logic. But the whole thing is, I mean, that's fine. Because the thing is, the whole thing is to is to kind of point out the flaws of the logic. So if you feel that the internal logic is weak, that's fine, say so. But as long as you kind of articulate. Let's take a look here. But that's what I'm saying. What I was saying before. I think what it's getting at, is that basically it's going to. Right. I think what they're getting at, is that kind of like more corporate slash public awareness. Will translate into advertising revenue. Let me take a look again. And you may find. I mean, yeah, I agree. It's shaky. Hold on 1 second. Um, right. Yeah. I mean, it's not ideal. I see what you're saying. But I mean, but yeah, but then just going to call attention to it. I mean, if the conclusion doesn't follow, then I mean that's part of the faulty internal logic. That just I mean, go and articulate that. I mean, I think that's fine. I've seen some of the I've definitely seen some of some of the kind of critical reasoning arguments where the internal logic really does seem completely shaky, and it's like, well, how did you actually get to that conclusion? Um, but you want to assume, that yeah. I mean, that there's logical consistency to the way that they're considering it. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So articulate that. So like for example, so write down in a couple of sentences here in the chat window, kind of how you would frame that, as part of the as part of the essay. Just needed 1 or 2 sentences. Yeah, but that's a completely valid flaw. So I think you could include that directly, in like a third paragraph. It's like you're basically making logical leap. You're making logical leaps that aren't bounded by the evidence here, and that don't even focus on the same thing. All right. You're saying that that's your assumption. That's what you're taking from the yeah. Um, I mean, I guess yeah. I mean, well, let me see. It's not the strongest argument. Yeah. I mean, I think there's talking. Yeah, I think there's talking about I mean, circulation costs. I don't think it's particularly strong, but I see. I mean, it's yeah. It's basically saying that like more money coming in is going to is going to increase say production capabilities, right? That was kind of my assumption upon reading it. So say you're generating more advertising revenue, you buy you buy a new printer or whatever that like so your output's higher. I mean yeah that's it's not great. Um, but then again, you could talk about kind of what's missing from it. All right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I see what your argument is, but I mean like what I would say. I mean, don't if something feels shaky as you're kind of going through it. I mean, you don't want to get too caught up in it because you've only got one prompt available to you. So if some, so I mean, some of the flaws you're going to see in these things are going to involve, they're going to, involve, either unfounded assumptions or conclusions that don't necessarily follow from from what's given. That's fine as long as you kind of clearly articulate kind of like where the where that shift is, right? Like I mean, you want to show that you kind of understand what it's trying to do and where it misses the mark. See. But I mean, unfortunately, but you don't have a choice in these things. So so it's like if you're completely not sold on it, if if you think it's just completely out of left field, I mean, that may be true, but then you at least need to say why and say how you would improve it. You know, for so like for this argument to actually like kind of retain validity, right? You would actually need to kind of demonstrate how how kind of directly how the this increase in advertising revenue is going to directly translate into circulation. This is not done. Here's where it's missing. Here's what you might add. Right? Yeah, exactly. And again, those can also factor in to your kind of earlier points as well. So we're wrapping up in a couple of minutes. I think that you clearly okay. I mean, sure. I haven't like kind of seen your writing style. Aside from like little comments in the windows here, but it's like you clearly have have a good analytical ability. So it's like what you really want to do is make sure that you're kind of structuring things well. That you're kind of extracting like the key basic arguments that that always from patent from prompt to prompt. If you do that, and you're really kind of clear and concise in each paragraph with kind of where your focus is, you'll do fine on this thing. All right. Well, thanks for dropping by. And when are you taking the GMAT? You have a test date set or not yet? Okay. What areas are you hoping to focus on? Because I will say, like, the more you practice these essays, the better you'll do at critical reasoning, and the more you practice critical reasoning, the better you can do at these essays. Yeah. Do you use a GMAT club? Well, I know you're. Yeah. That's one thing with the critical reasoning, the kind of the strategy I was talking about. Like kind of where you're really kind of reducing something to its essence, that can really save you a lot of time. Because rather than kind of parsing through a whole bunch of like, like a noisy passage, right? Um, if you can kind of like get the kind of the core information, that could save you a lot of time. So I would practice both in terms of critical reasoning, in terms of these kinds of prompts, in terms of reading comprehension too. Try to really kind of distill whether it's a passage or whether it's each paragraph in a reading comprehension thing. Try to like distill it down to like a couple of words so that you can really sum up the main idea or the key arguments. If you can do that, that can save you a lot of time. Also, in the reading comprehension, try to like focus on you ideally want to save most time for the questions. When you're reading, you just want to make sure that you get the structure. And that's true for these as well. All right, well, best of luck with your test, Deepak. And thanks for dropping by. Have a good week. Oh, sure. I'll put it here. My name is Steve Markowski. I'm a tutor for a group. You're welcome. I'm glad you got something out of it. Enjoy your week. You too. Stop recording.